Hello and welcome to the Digital Craft Festival. I am so happy to be having a show and tell conversation today, and myself, I'm Helen Kemp and I work for Design Nation, and with me are some very talented women. We've got Pryke, ceramicist, we've got Lucy Martin and Lucy Spink, who work in precious jewellery. We've got Francesca Kay, who is a poet and a printer, and Beatrice Mayfield, who is a textile designer specialising in embroidery. So before we start, our topic today is collaboration and all things working together within the craft and design sector. One of my favourite topics and something that's very dear to our hearts at Design Nation. Design Nation, we're a nationwide portfolio supporting talented craft and design professionals across the UK, and I would say in our small team, collaboration is the heart of what we do. So we're really interested in building partnerships, helping our members collaborate and work together, setting up regional hubs alongside national activity, and basically we feel like that knowledge, events, networks, products all come out of collaboration that we could never achieve singly. And today, I'll let everyone introduce themselves now before we crack on. Let's find out what everyone does. So, in the top of my screen, Lucy Martin, you're first for me. Would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
I'm a jeweller working in precious metals and coloured stone, so I specialise really in coloured stone and layering together lots of contrast in colour and texture in stone. I'm here in my studio in South East London, so I work in a big studio full of other makers, other craft people, and yeah, that's me.
Lovely. Beatrice.
Hi, I'm Beatrice Mayfield. I'm a textile designer and I specialise in hand embroidery using a lot of embellishment and traditional techniques. And I make a whole range of accessories, particularly for this fair. I'm based in North London and I work from home. And I'm also 1/3 of a collaborative group called Lot with 2 other jewellers.
Oh, fantastic.
That's me.
Lovely. Lucy Spink.
Hi, I'm Lucy Spink Jewellery. My work is predominantly silver and gold with some semi-precious stones mixed in. I'm also part of a pair of people, me and another Lucy Turner, and we make these little Formica and sterling silver earrings as our collaboration. Lucy Turner is a furniture maker and works in G-Plan furniture and Formica, so the collaboration is something we started about 8 years ago and is sort of slowly built. But yeah, that's me.
Lovely. Sue.
So hello, I'm Sue Pryke. So I am a maker and I work with ceramics, making slip cast tableware. So I work in my studio here in Leicestershire, but also I collaborate with industry for volume production, so work as a designer as well. I've done that for a long, long time. And also work with smaller factories, so whether they're in the Midlands or there's a factory in Poland that I've worked with too, just making small scale batch production. So I suppose essentially I can sort of develop a shape that I'm making in the studio and then also do an industrial version of it, which sort of hits a higher market. So I'm collaborating on various levels actually. So yeah, that's kind of me.
Oh, lovely. And Francesca.
Well, hello, I'm Francesca Kay, and I'm a poet and letterpress printer and maker of things. And I come from Hay-on-Wye on the Welsh borders. And all my work comes from my great love of words and ideas and books and the natural world. So I produce my poems in little seed packets to plant the poems in your mind. And I make prints, you can see some behind me. And everything comes straight from my heart. So you can find me online. And I'll tell you my shop name because it's a bit weird. It's on Etsy and it's called Corto 17. For reasons I can't remember, I made it years ago.
How would you spell it, Francesca? How would you spell that?
Quarto, Q-U-A-R-T-O. It's a printing term.
Perfect. How nice. And we've got such a big range of ways to collaborate, right the way from solo working through to working with other makers in groups, right up to manufacturing. So I'm sure we're going to get a lot of different opinions, but I think we'll start with the biggest question of all, really, of what does collaboration actually mean to you? Really, it's such a broad topic. Lucy, you seem to have a really interesting collaborative partnership. So what does this collaboration mean to you? Lucy Spink.
I think it's quite an informal arrangement. Lucy used to live just up the road from me in Cornwall when she first started out, but has moved since. So it's a long distance collaboration now, which transformed it slightly. And most of our communication is done digitally through text messages, emails, etc. It's really lovely to have somebody in a completely different discipline to bounce ideas over, and she works in a very different way to me, really bold, colourful, bright pieces of furniture, and I think my work is quite delicate and subtle. So those two really big contrasting things coming together to produce something quite unique, I think, because the Formica pieces are double-sided, so you can take them off and flip them over, and the studs run through the middle, so you can remove those, so it allows you to wear those in 4 different ways. So it's something that we sort of worked on together to try and see how we could have a really good USP, and I think that having somebody to bounce ideas off became really important and vital to that process, because I think I work on my own in my studio in my garden, so have very little collaboration or chance to chat to people, especially now. So I think yeah, collaboration is really important because it just takes you out of your little bubble.
Yeah. What do other people feel about that?
I think it's right, especially now if you're in your studio. I mean, like Lucy, like most makers, they're in a shed, aren't they, at the end of the garden? So it's really difficult to keep motivated, especially sort of when you're not having any contact with anybody else. Well, I guess I'm fairly fortunate in that I collaborate quite a bit with my husband. So some of my main tableware range is called Mr. and Mrs. range, because we developed it together years ago, and that's still in production. So like the teapot, I'll just show you because it's here. The teapot, I mean, John makes the handles for me because they're steam bent oak, and then I make the ceramics. So you know that we've always got each other to bounce ideas off, and without John here to do that, I mean, that I would find that really difficult, because I think creatively you need to chat about your ideas. I mean, even just sometimes sending an email, you know, it's great if you can just say to somebody else, what do you think to this? Will you just read this before I send it? So, you know, in a workshop situation, when you're developing something new, or if it's not work that's ongoing, just to be able to have that sort of chit chat about what, you know, about how work's going is just really important, isn't it? So, you know, it's hard if you're on your own, especially now when there's no fairs happening and we're not getting together. So I think collaboration is really important on various levels.
So I think you're absolutely right about fairs. I have so missed seeing other makers this year. Yeah. I felt really sad, you know, the weekend that should have been Craft Festival just recently. And you kind of rely on seeing others, don't you, and just chatting to them about stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they've gone.
It's a huge part of what we do, isn't it? Especially the Crafts Festival. It's one of my favourite events of the whole year. I love it. The atmosphere is brilliant. It's a great family fair, but you get to meet the people that you know that you've got so much in common with, other people that work with their hands all day long. And it's just, as you say, it's just a big part that's missing, isn't it?
We had at Design Nation a group at Made Makers this weekend, and it was so hard as a person that thrives on events to miss that connection. And we actually ended up doing a virtual Prosecco hour for the private view, just to get that like buzz of celebration. And it was really lovely, and to see all the faces and, you know, do a cheers. But I think that sort of connection with people that have things in common with you
I've found it quite interesting because I work a lot with other makers in terms of, a bit like Sue, I'm working with industry, although everything I do is one-off, we don't repeat. And that's brilliant because you have this, you're working with a whole group of other people who are specialists in what they do. So there's this amazing thing of talent and skill and knowledge that you learn. But all of that, when we got into the beginning of all of this madness, that all stopped for me, and so that's why I then focused on my own work. And actually I've really enjoyed just having that bit of time to be able to go, this is just about you, and it's not about then having to work, although, and I love, and now I'm beginning to miss it, and I'm thinking in January I'm just like, please can we have another commission come up so that and go back to that way of working. But it's, I think, working like that, and also because I work with in Lot, which is this working with two jewelers, I think it means when I do work on my own, I'm so much more focused, and it's almost like being given this little bit of time, and the knowledge then that I've got from other people, and knowing that I can go and talk to other people, it makes a real difference to how I make now.
Really interesting.
Beatrice, has it actually changed any of your practice having more time for yourself?
Oh yes, yes it has, because it means that I've had more time to work out ideas and work through things that I've wanted to do. So I've had ideas that I've wanted to do, and there's never been enough time. And so I hardly ever do fairs because getting the stock together just isn't the time. And that's also one of the positive about online shows, is actually I haven't needed to have probably as much as I would need going into a real show, although I do love going to the real shows, and like you, yeah, it's when you see people once a year, and it's part of that. But yes, it has, and certainly also the work that I've done with Lot really has, because it took us into another market. I've just got one piece that's one of the pieces that we've made together. And so Jed is a jeweler who works with glass, and Sarah works with metal. So that's her, and that's a part. And then this is me, which is all hand beaded. And that again makes it makes me think in a completely different way, because I'm having to work around two other people who also work with resistant materials, which is very, very different as well. But yeah, I find that really, the amount of trust that comes up with how we work and between us is huge. And I think that's another thing that's really important in collaboration.
Yeah, trust. Has anyone else had experience of having to build that trust up with other makers or other partners? Yeah, Lucy, Martin.
Yeah, I think that my primary experience of collaboration really is commission work. So I would say about half of my work is to commission, and I think that the best commissions with private clients are collaborative in a way, not necessarily that they have you still drive the design, it needs to remain your work very much, but I think you can get a lot out of that partnership. And when it's a good maker client partnership, then I think that there is a lot of trust in that there's a lot of discussions. You're going to be making something where the outcome is meaningful for them and it's the right outcome, but then at the same time there's a level of trust where, okay, you've got all the information now and you can go into the studio and make what you're going to make. So I suppose that's why I can recognise what Beatrice was saying about the trust element, working with other people.
How do others navigate those sort of boundaries between their own work and working with others?
I think if there is a commission and it's specific, then you just have to do it, even if it's not quite what you want. I mean, my best collaborations have actually been with composers, people that write music, and I've supplied words. And again, you get a specific brief, and as Beatrice says, you remain yourself, but you have to fit in to what the brief is. I've written pieces for narrator and either chamber orchestra or wind ensemble, and so it has to be a certain length, and it has to be, you know, with kids things, it has to be a certain type of writing, and I find that really fascinating. And also composers, I don't know what composers are doing now, along with musicians, they're all at home, but can be very, very exacting. Like, you know, this sentence is a little bit too long. Can we take out some syllables, you know? Right, which ones would you like me to take out? But I love that. And I love going into a discipline where I've got to remain myself, because that's what people want. But I have to actually fit in with something. And after a whole lifetime of doing exactly what I want to, given a brief, it's really nice to fit in.
The constraints that are coming at you are sort of fueling you. Sorry, Sue and then Lucy.
It reduces the parameters, doesn't it? So that's really interesting what you're saying about working with composers, because going into somewhere like IKEA or Marks and Spencer's or any of the big industry companies that I've worked for, you're given the same, you know, you've got to design to a brief, and with IKEA in particular, you've got to design to, you know, to a cost factor as well. You know, this mug has got to sell for £2.50 or even 50p. So, and that's a different design. So you're saying about cutting the music a bit short, it's exactly the same in a design brief as well. You know, you can't exactly go and do what you want to do because the parameters are too tight. I mean, one of the projects that I did last year for IKEA was a range of stacking plant pots, which sounds really easy, but actually to get things to stack without them sticking or without them toppling over, or, you know, the whole design of it isn't that straightforward. And also it's got to be cheap, it's got to be, you know, it's got to fit into this parameter of cost again. It's quite an interesting way to work, and you can kind of leave a bit of yourself behind, because it is just a matter of just being sort of fairly automated about it and ticking a few boxes. So it is really interesting going to work for industry. And you don't necessarily need to you don't need to think about what you'd actually do personally in the studio. It's completely different. You can remove yourself from that situation. So it's always great to go and do a freelance job, because it's very different from working in the studio and developing a new collection. Much narrower, tighter, yeah.
Lucy, did you?
I was just going to say, probably my commission experience is a bit different from Sue's, and she's talking about a very different kind of working with industry and things. But I think I was just going to say that I have found that while there is like this with the parameters, there is some sort of constriction. Almost always, I'll learn something, a little tangent that takes my work off, my personal work off, the next time I get to come back to making collection pieces for the next show or whatever. That I've always learned something from that. So sort of from the restriction slightly of having a brief, there's always then the expansion and freedom following on from that, because I've learnt the next thing, the next little piece to add on to my own work.
Lucy, can I just ask you that? How aware are you of when you're doing that? And because I find it hits me afterwards that I realise something's gone in a different way. Do you make a point of trying to see what that is before you start, or do you just does it just happen?
I think both. I think mostly it probably happens afterwards, you know, but sometimes I think with a commission you have said and you've got to learn one new thing in order to complete what you've said, or you've got to find out more about a material or a stone or whatever that you haven't used before. And I think then you always think, oh, well, this will be interesting because I've not done this little bit before, and then it comes back and feeds back into your collection. So I think a little bit of both, yeah.
I would agree with that, Lucy, completely. And I think that's a really nice part about taking on commissions, because I think sometimes they can be quite tricky in that, especially when you're doing them without a meeting in person, so all remotely, and trying to work out what the person's got in their head as what they want their end result to be, and maybe trying to learn something new in order to produce that thing to the best of your ability, so that it mirrors as closely as you can what they're thinking, is a really nice thing. And I've just been working on a piece for somebody that was needed to work in 2 different ways, and it's been really interesting this week trying to figure out those fine details of, I can't talk about it because it's a commission, but I'm quite excited about how it's going to work next into my work, and that was quite an organic process, which was really nice and is definitely going to inform some new pieces of work.
When people are talking about this, is this sort of problem solving and ways of thinking through, or is this sort of a physical skill that people are learning from others? How does it show up?
I think it is that thing of learning new things, and whether it's just learning how to do something or something very practical. I had a commission last year to make a big book that was going to be part of a storytelling project, and it was on the subject of time, and I wanted to typeset a little clock face. Now with movable type, setting in a circle is very, very difficult, and I thought, well, I'm just going to do this, you know. And I didn't think about, not many people set in a circle because it's difficult. I just sat there and worked out how to do it, and have printed in circles ever since. You get going. And I never would, it's that nice thing, you never would have thought of something unless somebody has said, could you make a little clock face out of type? Yeah, okay. And then you do. So it's a mixture of the problem solving and the practical, but it's also, I think, a mixture of not being afraid. You know, sometimes I say to myself, I don't know, I'm not sure how to do that. But if somebody asks you, you have to immediately, I'm a great believer in always saying yes. I don't know about the rest of you. I go, yes, I will do this. And then have to think how. But I don't think you should ever say no. I mean, that's always worked for me so far.
And Sue, how is this sort of showing up for you working with manufacturing?
How is it what? Sorry?
How's it showing this? I'm presuming that the sort of constraints of working with manufacturers might bring something different to your work as well, or maybe not.
Yeah, it's true. You do work through ideas, and yeah, it's like Francesca. Then, you know, if somebody asks me to do something, I'll jump in with both feet and then think, how am I going to work this through then? But I think it is really good. It's a good way to work through ideas. And there's always, you know, if you're collaborating with a manufacturer, you know, they've got a good set of skills, probably far better than mine at their fingertips, because they do it day in, day out. They've got a team of people around them. So that's always fantastic, because they can figure out the problems. I can design something and say, is this going to work? And they'll come back straight away and say, well, if you change the foot ring on that to make it this shape, then it'd be easier to cast. So, you know, that knowledge I didn't have before, and then I can take that and, you know, use that in the studio environment. So it's always, I think, very beneficial to have collaborations, whether it's on a small scale batch production level, like me going to a factory in Stoke. There's a range that I did, again, this is my cup, but, you know, I've taken my molds to Stoke, and, you know, this is in bone china. So, and what you get back is very different from what I'd make in the studio, but it's the same process. But there's so much that I can gain from that. So whether it's sort of this batch production level, or whether it's high volume, or even collaborating with, I mean, I've collaborated with Joe Pond before, the jeweler, and we've done a range of earrings together, you know, a range of jewellery together. You know, and there's so much to learn from that process, because I need to understand what Joe needs from me in terms for an earring to function. I mean, it sounds very straightforward, but, you know, there's certain details that we'd need to work through to ensure that things are the right size and that they fit, you know, the thickness of the ceramic that the silver was going to fit through. You know, there needs to be some discussion about dimensions there, and practicalities, which is all beneficial. You know, it sort of just goes into that, you know, into the vocabulary of everyday working practices, which is, you know, great. It's always good. Yeah.
Can I ask, Sue, when you've worked on, I'm intrigued, the pots that you were talking about, the IKEA stacking pots, for example, when you had to work on something that's quite restrained in terms of pricing, have you sort of taken that notion back to your studio and thought, actually, I'd quite like to have a go at doing this in my own studio work?
Yeah.
Where price isn't an issue, to see what comes out of the idea without the constraint.
I think that example of the plant pot, I took quite a lot from that, because it's like, well, what they're trying to do is to get the sizes to fit the plant pot. So for instance, they're selling plant pots that people are going to buy from the shop just before, you know where they are at the end of IKEA. I mean, that's really important for IKEA as well, where things are placed in the store. So you buy the plant pot just before the plant, or around the plants, don't you? So you grab the plant and you think, oh, is that going to fit in the plant pot? So you have to design it from what size are the plastic pots. So you're starting right back at the beginning in an area that isn't anything to do with ceramics necessarily. It's to do with planting and the horticulturists that have grown the plants in the first place, and the set sizes. So all the plant pots have to fit into that. And then also, IKEA, they have to fit so many onto a pallet. So they're thinking in the massive strategic scheme of things. I mean, one example of IKEA is that years and years ago, they took a centimetre off of their catalogue all the way around, which meant that they could get far more onto the pallet. So therefore, far more pallets onto the trucks and onto the containers. So they're saving money. So it's all about sustainability for IKEA. So all of those pointers are really important for me in the studio. I don't necessarily take, the stacking pots and reproduce it in the studio, but there are little elements of that about sustainability that I think, oh, well, if I just do that, I can get 3 of these in a box or 5 in a box or whatever, rather than putting 2 in. So, or I can get so many on the kiln shelf. So, all of these ideas, it's information, isn't it, that you gather en route. It's part of the journey. Those things are really important, and even more important now, as we're all very aware of sustainability, and trying to sort of just make sure that the packaging that I use is sustainable, and that I'm actually getting as much into the kiln per firing as I possibly can to make it cheaper, but also using less energy. So there's loads of information that you can gather on a project, whether it's huge volumes like that or working with another maker like Joe. So yeah, lots to learn.
Yes, yeah.
I love that. That's so interesting. Does anyone else have very specific things that they've maybe taken away from a collaboration project that sort of changed their working?
I had some mentoring with Beatrice a few years ago and took away some really specific things. That's another kind of collaboration that I think is really important when you're working on your own in your garden shed. And those conversations that we had, Beatrice, I think were really good for me to help move my practice on and maybe look at things in a slightly different way. So yeah, definitely taking good things on from collaborating in lots of different ways.
I do think mentoring is a form of collaboration, definitely, Lucy. And I think because I mentor quite a lot, and I find that what I learn, and I teach a lot as well, and I find I'm learning constantly from how different makers, because they work in different markets or they work in different materials or whatever, how they're trying to approach making a living from it is always so fascinating, and how they think. And as a mentor, it's not your job to tell them, it's your job to steer and work with them and work around that and support it. And it's the same with teaching, and particularly with teaching at the moment, the students really keep you on your toes in their opinions on sustainability or on how political they are at the moment. It's fascinating, and that goes with you, and that I find I'm a real sponge with that. I really enjoy that part of what I do as well.
Do a lot of workshops with kids in schools, particularly little children, because most writers are very afraid of small children, but I think they're brilliant. And what I have learned from that is is about what works and how to change things that don't work. When you are faced with a class of nursery age children who are 3 and 4, if you're not interesting enough, within 30 seconds, they will get up and walk away. And they have been the best teachers of all me about how to think about how you present yourself. I mean, that's important for me because I'm a performer as well as a writer. But as you were saying, Beatrice, the people you are teaching often teach you a very great deal in return.
So let's have a look at that. What are the... Sorry, Sue, with you.
I was just going to second what Beatrice was saying, but Francesca too, that going in and teaching, because I've done some teaching recently with De Montfort and Central St Martin's, and it's all on Zoom, which is interesting as well. You know, that's another learning curve. You know, we're all getting better at it, aren't we? But you know, what the students come up with, it's like, oh, actually, I hadn't thought of that. And they, you know, because they are sort of together. It's a younger community generally. It's fascinating to see how they're working and to see what's really important to them. I mean, there's some of the things about marketplace and being aware of you know, the market in terms of making that I can pass on to them, but there's little snippets of details about what they're buying. And when I look at my Instagram and see actually what the age group is, it's quite a young age group that's following me. So I think, oh, actually, maybe I should be listening to what the students have got to offer, because they're the people that are, I mean, there are probably a lot of makers that are following me on Instagram, but it's all interesting again, isn't it? You know, it all goes into this knowledge bank. So students are fascinating. Yeah, good bunch.
That's interesting. And I can't remember, someone else mentioned it earlier about reaching maybe a different audience with collaboration. Does anyone feel like, maybe Beatrice, with your, was it you saying that you've got a different audience coming together with your collaborative work?
Yeah, I do. And actually it's two different audiences, because with the work with Lot, we did that because we all wanted to get into a different market, and we wanted to get into that kind of sort of high end. The two jewelers both do, Jed and Sarah both do goldsmiths and loot and that sort of level. And I, like I said, I don't really show that much. So for us, we wanted to do projects that were going to take us somewhere else, and doing them together meant not only did we have the skills to do it, but we had the confidence to do it. And it was, you know, every time somebody had a wobble, there were another two going, no, of course it's fine, we'll do this. And so that took me into one market, which is that kind of collector's market. But the work I do for where it's not necessarily my name and it's for interiors or for fashion, that goes back into a completely different market, which is also mainly international as well. So, and that's not necessarily, it's probably a bit like Sue, it's not a market that, I don't know who those people are, where it ends up. But that, I don't mind that. And I don't mind also it doesn't have my name on it either. It's still me being part of, without me, those couldn't happen. And that's how I think of it. It doesn't matter, it's not my name emblazoned all over it. Sometimes I wouldn't want it to be either. But yeah, but it definitely is two very different markets. And what I don't know yet is whether any of that feeds back in to then me and what I'm doing. It's kind of like a triangle, but I don't know if it's connecting up yet.
I think it's interesting, this idea of finding different markets that both Beatrice, you and Sue have mentioned, because the fact is we're all stuck at home now, and so it's a question of trying to find people online. I mean, where are our buyers? We need to find them, and we all do Instagram, and that's wonderful. But I think the other collaboration thing is learning all of this that we're doing now. You know, we've all had to learn how to do Zoom and how to make little films and how to get out there more. And I think the big collaboration, which involves all of us, is actually with Digital Craft Festival. Because, you know, Sarah said to everybody, right, okay, let's put it online, let's do this. And I don't know about the rest of you, perhaps you are more savvy than me, but I was like, really? Oh my God, I can't do this. And then I remembered that I always say yes to everything. Oh yes, okay. But I mean, Sarah has kind of made us all collaborate with her, hasn't she? You know, to go online and to make the digital thing work. And I think that's possibly the most interesting thing we'll get out of this year. I mean, even if everything goes back to what was normal, we've still got all of this going on, and perhaps the audience and the customers online, perhaps we'll see them all in person again, or perhaps they're a different, they're a different thing. So it's the big collaborations, isn't it, that you don't necessarily think, when you're sitting at home trying to work out how to film something with your camera or take a really good picture. I think we're all collaborating to find ways of reaching, not necessarily customers, but reaching people. I think in general, people are desperate to see lovely things. And it's up to us to try and find them and say, look, we're all still here. We're all still making, I think that's really important. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that.
Let's have a look at that, because we're all seem pretty positive about the power of collaboration and what it brings to us. But how are we doing it at the moment, and how are we doing it online? Or maybe go on, Lucy. Yeah,
I think it was interesting what Francesca was saying. It's making me think about obviously we've all had to learn masses this year that we didn't, most of us didn't know how to do half these things before this year. I had to think a lot more without in-person shows about how do I get across the qualities of the thing that I make without being able to really necessarily speak individually to people, or so simple things, but things that I never got round to, like properly trying to take worn shots of my jewellery so that people can really see scale on the body, because you usually end up doing your photography just before you do your application, and the applications all want the white background photographs, and so this is what we have, which are lovely, but then they don't necessarily show all of the detail or the surface or the scale of it against a body or whatever's relevant to your product. So yeah, definitely had to think about those kind of things. How do I tell the story better about what it's actually like, my product?
Yeah, I've had to do some of that as well. It's putting yourself in the viewer's situation, and also thinking a bit about, if someone goes onto your website, what are they looking, if they're looking for something because they've seen that on your Instagram, how do they find it? And do they find it against a whole mush of other stuff? And it's a really different, you just spend ages unpicking it, and that's really fascinating. And I'm absolutely rubbish at all of that side, especially online stuff. I find it really hard. I find Instagram really difficult as well, which again is where my students have come in, because for them it's like second nature. They don't even think twice about it. But that's, I think, yeah, you're right. You have to really put yourself in a viewer's mind as opposed to a buyer's mind, in a way. It's how do they view it, not necessarily even how do they buy it.
I think that's a really nice idea, Beatrice, because if you think about big fairs, I mean, I know you don't generally do them, but big fairs, you see and talk to loads of people who don't buy anything from you, but they stop and enjoy what you do. We all love browsing around a fair and seeing lovely things. We don't buy from every stall, but it's that desire to still experience craft and art, I think, is still there. And as you say, Beatrice, you've got to sort of step out. You've almost got to collaborate with yourself, haven't you? And step outside and say, right, what would somebody looking at this think? And it's difficult because you're critiquing yourself, but we all have to do it. And I think things like Digital Craft Festival actually focus the mind. I've learned how to use my camera in the last 2 months because I'm getting ready for this, and all those little things, I think they're really important.
That goes back to that collaboration on the bigger scale that you were talking about, Sue. I think with the Digital Craft Festival, it's probably made a lot of us look in much more detail at how we put our work across to people. So if somebody looks at one of my pairs of earrings on the website, for example, it might not be very evident how they feel. So they can't pick them up They just have to read what I've written, and if I don't put anything in about whether they're quite chunky or lightweight or how they feel when you wear them, if they move a lot, or whether they're quite static, I think that kind of information for me has been a bit of a revelation of, right, okay, so I need to view my website as somebody else who's never met me and doesn't know anything about my work, and what questions would I ask if I was looking at it for the first time, which is a bit mind-blowing and takes a really long time.
True, isn't it? Because I'm always amazed that I get international sales, because the work that's on my website, my tableware, slip-cast tableware range, it's very tactile, it's unglazed on the outside, and we polish it, and I think in the description it says, you know, until we polish it until it's pebbly smooth, so it gives an indication of what the surface is like. You know, that could be a rough pebble, or it could be a highly polished pebble, and I mean, it's glazed inside the piece, but I think you really need to hold it to be able to experience, you know, the surface and how heavy the cup is and how big the cup is. I mean, I can put dimensions on there, but people don't very often get a ruler out and see what that dimension is. They just assume that it's a particular size. So it always surprises me how many online sales I get. I mean, I can understand it here if people have seen me at a fair or they've been to a shop and they think, oh, I wish I'd bought it, and then they find me online. But international sales, unless they've found it in a shop somewhere, it's like, well, actually, you're taking a bit of a punt, really, aren't you? But then I suppose we're all getting very savvy and very able at buying anything online. And there's plenty of things that I buy online that I think, oh, that's not quite what I thought it was going to be, but okay, I'll go with it. So maybe we're all just a bit, you know, just taking things in our stride and, you know, not being too hypercritical. I think it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, it goes back to trust again as well. I think you have to trust the maker to be accurate in how they're putting forwards their products.
Yeah.
And the pebble smooth idea, I know what that feels like in my head. I kind of go, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But maybe if it's not your first language and you try and understand that is an interesting idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't thought of it like that, actually. Yeah, not your first language. Yeah.
I'm interested, Sue, because your online following is pretty large by most designer maker standards, and you might be a bit more well versed. Do you feel like there's a collaboration between your online audience and yourself, or do you see it in a different light?
No, there is, because I mean, it's about stories, isn't it? It's like anything that you do, you know, you need to create a story. I mean, what have I got, 30,000, but, you know, there's other makers that are way, you know, like 90 to 100. I mean, what's Tortoise? He's like 270,000, I think now, which is enormous for a maker. So I think it's, people are intrigued by process, they're intrigued by, and there's certain pictures that don't work, some pictures that always work. So, but I think also they like to see a mix of, you know, what you're about as well. So occasionally I'll post a picture of, you know, I don't know, autumn leaves or something, you know, when I'm on a walk. So I think it's just a combination. But I think there's a huge percentage of people that follow me that are potters. That's I know that, and they're, you know, they like to see the process. They're interested in clay, so, you know, they're going to like to see the process, aren't they? And for those that aren't makers, they're intrigued to see how things are made because they haven't got a clue. So, you know, it's an informative relationship. You know, they're expecting me to provide them with something that's interesting, and every now and again, you know, give them an image of a pot where they can, you know, tell me whether it's a good idea or not. So, you know, it goes both ways. You know, I'm trying to feed them interesting stories about how I make things and what it's like to be a maker, but then I'm also wanting to have that collaboration and that conversation, perhaps on a daily basis as well, back, so that I know what I'm doing is of interest to somebody. Because it's, you know, even at 30,000 followers, you know, some days I get like 100 posts over a day and think, I mean, 100 likes, and think, well, why doesn't anybody like that? So then it could be timing, it could be lots of things to do with the algorithm, but at the same time, you know, not a lot of people have liked that for whatever reason. It might be that people have just gone out shopping and they haven't seen the post. But, you know, you do question what you're doing and what you're actually putting out there. So I think it's a two-way thing, definitely. It is a collaboration. Yeah.
Interesting. So
I think that
storytelling, and then also an exchange, like feeling free to ask people.
And people love that. They like the interaction. Yeah, I do. When people ask a question, I'm first on there going, oh yeah, I like it, or whatever. You know, if they want feedback, I'm happy to, you know, engage. That's what it is, isn't it? It's engagement. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Does anyone else have any sort of tips or things that are working for them that they're enjoying, or that are working for them online that we can take?
I think that idea of process, as you say, Sue, to you, ceramics are, it's obvious to you how things are done, but people don't know. And I find that with typesetting, you know, with movable type, I've got some wood print type behind me, prints, actually showing how things are typeset and printed. And that's the thing that people really love.
Yeah.
And this is how it's done, you know, and this is a little, if I take pictures of little films of the actual type process, again, it shows that people that this is not done on a computer.
Yeah.
This is not made, you know, it's a pair of hands making it. And anything that shows the process, no matter what your process is, you know, we have to remember that most people don't make things, and so they're very interested to see that the people do.
I think, so you're right about that thing of most people don't make things, and we all very much take for granted that what we do is normal, and perhaps take it for granted, I think. And then you meet somebody who has no idea how to make a necklace or a book or a piece of ceramics, or so really intricate textiles, or create a piece of furniture, and then kind of wowed by it and view it as like this almost magical thing. And I think sometimes it's good to remind ourselves of that, because you become a bit introspective, I think, sometimes, and very critical of your own work, which is necessary for it to progress and get better. But sometimes it's quite good to think about how people view makers as people who are creating things with their own hands, and that's quite special, actually.
I was going to say that although I make slip cast pieces, you know, when I see other makers just making things with clay, I'm always intrigued. You know, any process. I mean, that's just ceramics. So, you know, I don't know how to make things endure. I don't know how to typeset pieces. I don't know how to, you know, to do embroidery or any other craft, really. I mean, I've seen it done, but any other processes I'm fascinated by. And I was chatting to my daughter, who's in her early 20s, and she's just started making soap. And she's got this Instagram account that she's taken from 0 to nearly 10,000 within a couple of months. And it's like, well, how are you doing that? And she's posting pictures of how to make soap. And so she sat down with me and went through my iPad, just my images, and went, well, why aren't you posting this? I've got stacks of images about process that I think, well, nobody will like that, because it's not very interesting, because it's just something that you do day in, day out. She's like, no, get it on there, get it posted. So, you know, as you say, we take it for granted because we do it all the time. So it's those snippets that are the fascinating bits and pieces to what we do, and it's how things are made that people aren't aware of. So yeah, get posting.
Do you think collaboration helps with that? Because when I work with pattern cutters, I think pattern cutters they're like the magicians of the world. They're just unbelievable. But they're like, well, we do this every day. No, that's not. And I'm just like, how do you get that from flat into being 3D and it all fits and none of the shapes look like they should because all the angles are wrong? So I think, yeah, it's so easy to overlook your own thing that you do.
Yeah, nicely put.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's interesting how we all lit up just talking about processes, whether ourselves. Like I'm an absolute sucker for process myself, and I've got into a deep Instagram hole of watching rug tufting. Incredible, with a tufting gun, and I was looking it up. I was like, have I got $1,000 for a gun myself? Like, it's wild what you can get excited by it. But so we're coming to the end of our hour already, and I wondered if we could, maybe we can finish up. I feel like there's so many strengths that have come out of collaboration recently, whether it's sort of creative stimulation, there's motivation and confidence coming out, the things that we've got in common, we can inspire people to learn, you know, you get new skills and knowledge, and then we take our work to new markets. How can we sort of come together as a sector now and sort of strengthen ourselves in these sort of difficult waters? How will we collaborate as a whole, so all craftspeople and designers? How can we use our power to come together? Yeah, Lucy.
Well, I think a good example of that was the Artist Support Pledge that happened sort of more towards the beginning of the first lockdown, wasn't it? So, you know, so people were selling things online, and when they reached a certain total of sales, then they pledged to buy something from another designer maker. So it's sort of pay it forward, is that what they call it, kind of system. So
yeah, perhaps
that kind of thing, not financially, but maybe with knowledge and time. I know that the one of the silversmith organisations, you know, they've had these amazing Zooms with older guys who are maybe coming to the end of their careers and retiring and leaving the trade, but obviously they've got this, you know, mountain of amazing knowledge. And so in these quieter times, they've been having all of these Zoom conversations and sort of webinars, seminars with these amazing banks of knowledge. So,
wow.
I think that's really interesting at the moment as well, because I've found that I've attended a lot more Zoom talks than I would have attended in real time. And I think I've probably heard people speak who probably wouldn't always, because they couldn't be there. And it's just something like this as well, in that I'd probably never have a conversation with all of you all together. And it's the fact also then I've seen Lucy again, and we never actually met either. So, but we're seeing each other again after quite a few years, and in a different context. So I think things like this are really important, and carrying that on. And I think it goes back to what Francesca said, that it's about reaching people. It's not about reaching clients or sales, really. It's got to be a broader, more holistic approach to it.
The last Digital Craft Festival in August, anyway, summer, I really enjoyed that, because it was lots of talks like this and getting to know all the makers. And as we said, like the Fab Five, the Design Nation thing on a Friday, you know, that's always fascinating. I always click on the links and see who everybody is, because you don't get to know everybody and you don't get to meet everybody. Even when you do the actual fairs, there seems to be, you have time to have a look around and get to know the work, but you don't always have a chance to catch up with the makers. You tend to sort of navigate yourself around the show and catch up with old friends, but you don't meet as many new people as you can meet on the Digital Craft Festival. So I really enjoyed the last one, because it had actually captured some of that excitement of the real event. You know, it was really exciting, wasn't it? To actually go and talk to people, to have a look at the studios, to look at the new work, and to take part in these kind of conversations was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Good way to connect. Yeah. I
think also it's really important that people like ourselves carry on doing what we do. Mm-hmm. But I feel very passionate about this. You know, it's been an extraordinary year, as we all know. And there's nothing we personally can do about, I don't know, the orchestras, the theatre companies, all the big stuff. We can't do anything about the arts and crafts on that huge scale. What we can do is like keep that flame alive, if you like, by keeping going as long as we can. And I think that's really important.
Maybe that generosity that we can offer as well in terms of sharing our skills and our knowledge is a really good thing, because there's a bunch of kids coming up behind us who are having quite a hard time at the moment with their education, and maybe their learning is changing. And if you're wanting to get into the creative sector, it must seem like it's a hard sector to be in anyway, but with the funding being reduced and education changing and maybe less access to studio spaces or workshops, I think perhaps we as more established makers can help with that by offering conversations like this that give younger people insight into how we work and the way we move forwards and change and cope with situations like this, and show that it can be done and we're still here making.
What a fun, that's just a lovely way to end, I think. Like, sort of not only a reflection on everything that we've got from collaborations, but what we're giving out. And I think generosity and carrying on and connecting and creating is just a lovely positive way to end. So I will say thank you so much to everybody involved, and thank you for tuning in and listening to the Digital Craft Festival, and thanks to Sarah James and all the team for giving us the chance to get together and have a little collaborative show and tell chat ourselves. So thank you. Please do check out everybody's websites and social media and say hello after this. Okay, thank you very much.